I love practicing OMAD, but I will say there are a lot of people out there who have the wrong idea about it. So in today's video, I'm going to take you through the top 5 myths about OMAD, and I'm going to try to debunk them. First off, a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor or a scientist or a nutritionist. I'm just someone who has practiced eating 1 meal a day for most of her days for the past 9.5 years. And I want to say that when I first came to OMAD, because I got there accidentally, I had a lot of these same concerns and thoughts in my head. But as it turns out, I had nothing to worry about. So the first big myth out there is that you cannot get enough nutrients if you only eat 1 meal a day. Now here's the thing, and I think this is a big misconception that people have about OMAD. They think that, oh, you mean that you're just eating like 1 small meal a day, and so you're severely restricting your calories, and then therefore, like if you're only eating 400 calories a day, there's no way you're going to get the appropriate amount of nutrition. And that is true. If you were only eating 400 calories a day, you would be in a bad way eventually. But that's not the way most people practice OMAD. The way I practice OMAD is like this. Like, I'm eating a normal amount of calories, but I'm just doing it at 1 meal. And this is probably why some people do so well with OMAD and other people do terribly with it. I think it comes down to, how much, what's your capacity for eating? And if your capacity for eating is pretty large, you probably are going to do well on OMAD because your 1 meal is going to be the right amount of calories. Whereas if you have that same kind of capacity and you carry that to each meal, you're going to be overeating and therefore gaining weight. On the other hand, the people who, they just really can't eat that much at one sitting, they're going to not be able to eat enough at OMAD. So this comes down to just an individuality kind of thing. If you try OMAD and you're like, I can't get nearly enough calories, then yeah, you're right. You shouldn't do it. But if you sit down and you're able to eat a full day's worth of calories at 1 meal, then it's probably going to be a good strategy for you. So basically, whenever you're thinking about OMAD and nutrients, just remind yourself that if you can get it in 3 meals a day, you can get it at 1 meal. Myth number 2 is that you're going to kill your metabolism if you practice OMAD. Now, I used to be obsessed with my metabolism. I was convinced that I had a slow metabolism. I thought that all the dieting I did when I was a kid and a teenager and all the diet pills I took probably wrecked my metabolism. What I realized eventually was that I had just been eating too much food. I was in the habit of emotionally eating out of just boredom, procrastination, and that kind of thing. And when I stopped those habits, then I ended up losing weight and keeping it off. Now, what I can tell you is my own experience, which is I've been practicing OMAD for the majority of my days for the past 9.5 years. And what I have found is that I was able to lose the weight, first of all, and I've kept it off with what feels like very little effort. It's not like as the years pass, I'm having to eat like less and less and less food. I'm still eating the same amount. I still have good energy. I still have great health. And so, I don't think that it's had any ill effect on my metabolism, but I'm just one person. This kind of goes back to that same misconception of, oh, you're just not going to be eating very much. Because if you, habitually way undereat, you're in a severe caloric deficit, then yeah, that can mess with your metabolism. But that's not what you're doing when you're practicing OMAD in a sustainable kind of way. Myth number 3 is that when you finally do get to your OMAD, you're just going to do some out of control eating. And that's not good, so you shouldn't practice OMAD. So now this one has a little bit of validity, and I think that this can happen when people try to just jump to OMAD. I did not jump to OMAD. I came to OMAD very, very gradually. I heard about intermittent fasting in 2014 at the very end of the year, and I just kind of started practicing it. And in 2015, I was really inconsistent, but I was just kind of learning how to fast. And by the end of that year, I was like at a 16.8, 18.6. And so in 2016, that's when I finally got really consistent with intermittent fasting. But still, it was about 4 months before I actually worked my way to OMAD. And so I came to this, idea of eating 1 meal a day in a very gradual kind of way. So my body was well adjusted to a pretty long fasting window before I ever made that jump. So when you're used to, going for a longer period of time and then sitting down and having your meal, you do sit down with more control. But if you try to just go from like eating 3 meals a day plus snacks, and then you're just going to try one meal, you probably are going to be really hungry. And when you sit down, you probably are going to kind of eat out of control. And so I would say for most people, it is better to try to baby step your way there. Now, you don't have to take a whole, year and a half like I did, but just starting out with a very manageable window and just slowly pushing it out as you feel ready, I think is a much better approach. And the cool thing with that is when you practice fasting, you are getting more discipline. Like every day you stick to a fasting window, no matter what it is, you are gaining discipline, which means you're telling your body no, or you're just basically saying, we're going to wait. And when you do that, it means that when you do sit down to a meal, you are going to be more in control. Another thing that I'll say about this idea of like sitting down, you're just eating out of control. This can also happen if you're under eating at your OMAD. And so that would be another thing to consider. Like you do need to absolutely make sure that you're eating plenty of food. Yes, you want to be in a deficit, but you want the deficit to be small enough so that it feels very doable. And also try to know yourself pretty well. Like if the idea of OMAD appeals to you, and it did to me. Like when I heard the idea of it, I was like, yeah, I like the idea of having, bigger meals and just waiting for longer to get that bigger meal. That sounded good to me. But I know that not everybody's like that. Some people would much rather have very small meals throughout the day, and that can work beautifully for them. And it really does become a mental game. So if you can already tell that, yeah, like if I tried to do that, I would feel super restricted, then I would say, try a different plan. Don't do OMAD. It's not for everybody. Myth number 4 is that OMAD is not sustainable. So this one, I think, comes from this idea that, if you do OMAD, you have to be super strict with it, and you're never going to be able to have like the freedom to like go out with your friends for lunch and things like that. I practice OMAD in a very laid back kind of way. I mean, I wrote the book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting. I like to approach things in a very flexible kind of way. And what I found with OMAD is it is very flexible. I mean, you can do OMAD, most of the days. And then if people have different plans, and you want to just join in on that, it's very easy to just do that and then get right back on plan the next day. And as far as just sustainability in general, like I said, I've been doing this for 9.5 years now. And at this point, I don't see any reason to stop. I don't want to stop. I prefer OMAD. I love the way my days kind of run when I'm doing OMAD. I prefer it to just having like an eating window. And the only reason I would consider doing something differently is if, I was advised because of medical reasons, like, you need to stop doing this because, this thing's going on. I would do that. I would stop if it were that case. But, at this point, that's not the case. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And lastly, myth number 5, you can't gain weight on OMAD. So this is kind of like the opposite of all these other myths. Some people think, actually, you can just eat as much as you want and somehow magically the calories do not count as long as you just squish them into this one meal. And that's simply not true. If you eat 3,000 calories at a meal day in, day out over the course of time, you are absolutely going to pack on the pounds. There is no diet plan out there where you can eat in a caloric surplus and lose weight. It's just not possible. The reason why I think people kind of get this idea in their head and maybe say things like this is that they feel like because they can eat such a big meal and still lose weight, they're not really aware how many calories they're actually eating. And yes, I have experienced some weight gain on OMAD where, it's like I'm in maintenance, I'm doing OMAD, and yet, I'm in a stressful situation. And there have been a lot of stressful situations in the past few years where this has happened, where I just noticed I'm eating just a little bit too much at my meal, and that will cause weight gain. The great thing I've found about OMAD is that because it's just the one meal a day, it's a lot easier to troubleshoot and realize here, I've just been eating like this much and I need to eat just a little bit less. And it's just easier to do when it's just the one meal. So at the end of the day, yes, I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there about OMAD. It's certainly not for everybody. And I think absolutely you should consult your doctor about any kind of health concerns you have, ask for their advice. But for me, I love this way of eating. It's been great for me and it definitely helped me to lose weight and it's definitely helped me to keep it off. So thank you so much for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one.